The air in the lawyer's office was thick with the scent of old paper and cheap perfume, my sister Sarah's. She sat across from me, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue, a perfect performance of grief. Beside her, my brother Mark impatiently tapped his expensive watch against the polished mahogany table. They looked like crows circling a carcass, dressed in their finest black, waiting to pick the bones clean. They were the first to arrive, of course. For the final act, the grand inheritance, they wouldn't dare be late. They hadn't shown up for a single hospital visit in the last 2 years, but for the reading of the will, they were front and centre. I remained silent, watching them. They thought this was their victory lap. They believed they were about to be rewarded for a lifetime of being my mother's golden children, while I, the ever-reliable, invisible daughter, would get a token mention and a thank you. They didn't realize their greed was the final piece of my puzzle. Every fake tear from Sarah, every impatient sigh from Mark, was a nail in the coffin of their expectations. They were here to collect a check for a love they never gave, but they were about to pay a debt they never knew they owed. You might be wondering how it all came to this. A family fractured and gathered in a stuffy room, waiting for a dead woman's words to divide them. How did the children who received everything end up with nothing? To understand that, we have to go back 2 years to the phone call that shattered my world and the first hospital bill that no one but me was willing to pay. It all started with a diagnosis, a few $1,000s, and a simple, selfish text message from my brother that read, "You handle it. We're busy." That single text message was the beginning of their end. They thought I was just the family ATM, the dutiful daughter who would quietly clean up every mess and pay every price. And for a while, I was. I drained my savings, sold my car, and took on extra shifts, all while they went on vacations and bought new homes. I did it because she was my mother. But as I sat by her bedside day after day, watching her fade while my siblings posted smiling photos online, a quiet, cold resolve began to form in my heart. They had forgotten about me. They had dismissed my sacrifices. And that was the biggest mistake they ever made. They had no idea that I wasn't just paying her bills, I was documenting every single one. The first bill was for $7,800. It was for the initial battery of tests, the MRI, the specialists. I remember staring at the number, my stomach twisting into a knot. I had some savings, but not nearly enough to handle what was coming. I called Mark first. The phone rang 5 times before he picked up, the sound of a bustling restaurant in the background. "Hey, can't talk long, I'm in a meeting," he lied. I could hear glasses clinking. I quickly explained the situation, the amount needed. There was a long pause on his end. "Listen," he said, his voice suddenly cold and distant. "My money is all tied up in investments right now. I can't just pull it out. You know how it is. You'll have to cover this one." A week later, he posted a picture of his brand new BMW on social media. The caption read, "Hard work pays off." Next, I called Sarah. She at least pretended to care, her voice dripping with syrupy, fake sympathy. "Oh, you poor thing, having to deal with all that," she cooed. "I wish I could help, but we're just swamped planning our anniversary trip to Hawaii. All our cash is tied up in the resort fees. It's non-refundable, you know." She promised to send a check as soon as they got back. The check never came. Instead, I got a postcard from a pristine beach with a palm tree on it. On the back, she'd written, "Thinking of you. Hope Mom is okay." That was it. Hope. That's what they offered. Hope and thoughts, while I was selling my grandfather's watch to make the next hospital co-payment. So I did what I always did. I handled it. I took a second job bartending on weekends, my hands raw from washing glasses and my feet aching. I ate ramen noodles for dinner and stopped buying coffee in the morning. My life shrank until it was nothing but work, and the pale green walls of my mother's hospital room, In that sterile, quiet space, I would sit for hours holding her hand, listening to the rhythmic beep of the machines that were keeping her alive. Sometimes she would wake up, her eyes cloudy with medication, and she would ask for them. "Where are Mark and Sarah?" she'd whisper, and I would lie. I would tell her they were busy with work, that they sent their love, that they would be here soon. I protected their image, even then. I protected them from her disappointment because I was still the designated shock absorber for our family's dysfunctions. But with every lie I told to comfort her, a piece of my own heart hardened into something cold and sharp. The turning point came on a cold Tuesday night in October. The rain was lashing against the hospital window, and the room was filled with a profound silence, broken only by the soft hum of the machines. My mother had been sleeping for most of the day, but her eyes fluttered open, and for the first time in weeks, they were clear. She looked right at me, a deep, weary sadness in her gaze. She tried to lift her hand, and I took it in mine. It felt as fragile as a bird's wing. "You look so tired, my dear," she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. "You're always here." I just squeezed her hand, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. She was quiet for a long moment, watching my face. "The bills, they must be very high," she said. It wasn't a question. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Are Mark and Sarah helping you?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy and sharp. All the lies I had told, all the excuses I had made for them, suddenly felt like a shroud I could no longer bear. I looked down at our joined hands and finally, I told her a sliver of the truth. "I'm managing, Mom." My voice was quiet, but she heard everything I wasn't saying. A single tear traced a path down her wrinkled cheek. "I was a fool," she said, her voice trembling with a sudden raw strength. "I saw what I wanted to see. I made one of my children a queen and the other a king, and I made you the servant who kept the castle running. I let them take, and I taught you to only give. I am so sorry. This is my fault. The confession broke me. All the resentment, all the quiet anger I had stored away, dissolved into a wave of shared sorrow. We just sat there as she cried, her frail body shaking with the weight of her regret. After a few minutes, she took a shaky breath and looked at me with a fierce new clarity. "Get me my phone," she commanded. "I need you to call Mr. Henderson, the lawyer. Tell him to come tomorrow. There's something I have to fix, something I have to make right." I hesitated, telling her she didn't need to worry about that now, but she gripped my hand with surprising force. "Yes," she insisted, her eyes boring into mine. "I do." The next day, Mr. Henderson came to the hospital. He brought the papers, and I was the sole witness as my mother, with a steady hand, signed her name, undoing a lifetime of injustice with a few strokes of a pen. Mark and Sarah never knew. They were too busy to visit, too busy to answer the phone, and too busy to realize they had been written out of the life they thought they were owed. After that day, a strange sense of peace settled between us. My mother knew her time was short, but the burden of her regret had been lifted. Our conversations were no longer filled with the unspoken weight of her other children's absence. We talked about her childhood, my father, and the silly things I used to do as a little girl. In her final weeks, I wasn't just her caretaker, I was her daughter again, and she was simply my mother. She passed away quietly in her sleep 3 weeks later. I was holding her hand, just as I had been for months. I was the only one there. My first call was to Mark. His voice was groggy, annoyed that I'd woken him up. When I told him, there was a beat of silence, not of shock or grief, but of calculation. "Okay," he said, his voice flat. "Okay, so what's the plan for the funeral? We need to get the ball rolling on, everything else, the estate." He was already thinking about the money. He didn't ask how she died or if I was okay. My call to Sarah was the opposite. She burst into theatrical sobs, wailing about her precious mommy. 10 minutes later, she sent me a text. I'm too devastated to help with the arrangements. You're so strong you can handle it. Just make sure it's a beautiful service that honors her memory properly. The best flowers, of course. And so I planned the funeral alone. They wanted the best, but they offered nothing. I paid for the casket, the service, and the flowers they demanded out of the last of my emergency fund. At the service, they stood at the front, accepting condolences, their faces masks of perfect sorrow. Mark gave a eulogy about what a wonderful, giving mother she was, and how much she had taught him about family values. Sarah sobbed into a handkerchief, leaning on her husband for support. I stood at the back, a ghost at my own mother's funeral. People I hadn't seen in years patted my arm, telling me how much my mother had loved my brother and sister. No one seemed to notice that I was the one who had actually been there. A week later, the call came from Mr. Henderson's office. The will reading was scheduled for the following Friday. I informed my siblings. The feigned grief in their voices was instantly replaced by a sharp, electric excitement. "Finally," Mark said, "time to put all this behind us." Sarah was already talking about what she would do with her share, a kitchen remodel, a new car. They were giddy, like children on Christmas Eve. They had no idea they were about to receive a lump of coal. They walked into that lawyer's office expecting a coronation, ready to claim the kingdom their mother had promised them their entire lives. And that brought us here. Back to the lawyer's office, the air thick with their manufactured grief and genuine greed. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the silent room. He adjusted his glasses and unfolded the document. "We are here today to read the last will and testament of Eleanor Vance," he began in a dry, formal tone. Mark leaned forward, a hungry glint in his eye. Sarah clutched her purse, her knuckles white. They were like runners at the starting line, waiting for the pistol shot. Mr. Henderson started with the personal effects. "To my son Mark, I leave my father's gold watch in the hopes that he will learn the value of time." A small, smug smile played on Mark's lips. "To my daughter, Sarah, I leave my collection of porcelain dolls and my wedding jewelry, so she may remember the importance of cherishing precious things." Sarah preened, exchanging a triumphant glance with Mark. They thought this was just the appetizer before the main course. They believed the house and the money were next, to be split evenly between the two of them, the rightful heirs. The lawyer took a sip of water. He seemed to be deliberately drawing out the moment. "We now move to the disposition of the primary assets," he continued, his voice unchanging. "This includes the family home, all financial accounts, stocks, and the remainder of the estate." He paused, looking over his glasses at my siblings. "It reads as follows. To my beloved children, Mark and Sarah, I leave the sum of $1 each." The silence in the room was absolute. It was as if the air had been sucked out. Mark's smug smile vanished, replaced by a slack-jawed confusion. Sarah's face contorted, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide the ugly shock twisting her features. "What?" Mark finally choked out. "That's a typo." "That has to be a mistake," Mr. Henderson continued, his voice steady as he read my mother's final damning words. "I have made this decision after long and careful consideration. In the final years of my life, when I was ill and most in need of the love and support of my family, only one of my children was there. Only one of them sacrificed their time, their money, and their own well-being to care for me." He looked directly at me. "Therefore, the entirety of my remaining estate, without exception, I bequeath to my daughter, an island of loyalty in an ocean of neglect, the one who was there until the end. I leave everything to Anna." Mark shot to his feet, his chair scraping violently against the floor. His face was a mask of crimson fury. "You have got to be kidding me. She was a sick, senile old woman. You manipulated her," he roared, pointing a trembling finger at me. "This is fraud." Sarah's manufactured tears were instantly replaced with real ones, hot with rage and disbelief. "How could you do this, Anna?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "After everything we did for her, we were her children. You were just there. You poisoned her against us. You snake!" For the first time since entering the room, I moved. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick 3-ring binder, placing it on the table with a soft but decisive thud. It was the record of my last 2 years, my life, reduced to receipts and spreadsheets. "Fraud?" I asked, my voice as calm and cold as ice. I pushed the binder across the table toward them. "Open it." Mark stared at it, as if it were a venomous creature. I opened it for him. "Page 1, I said, my voice level. "The initial emergency room bill for $7,800, paid in full from my savings account. Page 2, the bill for the first round of chemotherapy, $14,200, paid for by the car I sold." The car Dad left me, I flipped through the pages. Every prescription, every specialist copay, every single dollar, it's all here. It totals $187,452.38. I then turned to another section. Here are the text messages. "Mark, here's the one where your money was tied up, sent a day before you posted about your new BMW. And Sarah, here's a copy of your lovely postcard from Hawaii. You said you hoped Mum was okay. While you were sunbathing, I was selling my jewelry to pay for her medication." They were silent, their faces pale. Their outrage had evaporated, replaced by a sick, dawning horror. They had been so consumed by their own importance that they never once considered their neglect was being recorded. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "I should also mention," he said, looking at Mark, "that your mother included a no-contest clause. Should you challenge the validity of this will and fail, you will forfeit your bequest and be liable for all of my clients' legal fees." The fight drained out of them completely. They slumped in their chairs, 2 spoiled children who had just been told the party was over. I stood up and looked down at them, not with hatred, but with a profound and final indifference. "You wanted the inheritance, but you refused the burden," I said quietly. "This isn't a lottery win. This is a reimbursement for a debt you refused to pay. My mother made things right. Now, my life is my own." I turned and walked out of the office, leaving them with their single dollars and the heavy binder full of the truth. I didn't look back. The door clicked shut behind me, and for the first time in my life, I was free.